Every Saturday we follow, we cheer the boys in blue, the most successful team in football. We're Scotland's gallant few, though at times they have been hard. We've followed near and far. You will always hear us roaring from the stands in Ibrox Park. Every Saturday we follow to cheer the boys in blue, the most successful team in football. We're Scotland's gallant few, who times they have been hard. We're followed near and far. You will always hear us roaring from the stands in Ibrox Park. Every Saturday we follow, we cheer the boys in blue, the most successful team in football. We're Scotland's gallant few, though times they have been hard. We're followed near and far. You will always hear us roaring from the stands in Ibrox Park. Every Saturday we follow to cheer the boys in blue, the most successful team in football. We're Scotland's gallant few, who times they have been hard. We're followed near and far. You will always hear us roaring from the stands in Ibrox Park.
Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Okay, folks, good evening and welcome to the Blue Heart 1872 podcast. Tonight, folks, joined by Chris Jack, author of Going for 55, Chief Rangers writer for the Herald and the Glasgow Times, and also a very close contact of our ex-chairman, Mr. Dave King. So, very welcome, Chris. Thanks for coming on. Good to have you.
No problem at all, Gary. Thanks for having us on.
Okay, Chris, before we move on, you were at Fir Park today, Chris. Working. Thoughts on today's performance?
I think the least said about it, the better. Probably. I thought the first half was really, really poor. Wasn't the reaction that I was expecting from Rangers. I thought they would have a bit more fire in the belly. I thought they would come out and really take the game to Motherwell and show a bit more quality and a bit more like an attacking nous. I thought the first 5 minutes looked okay. Was had the chances for Kent and Tillman early on. After that, first half was a non-event. Second half, I thought overall they were slightly better. Also, Tillman's goal is a wonderful bit of solo skill. A lovely finish at the end of it. Lundstrom gets a wee bit of luck out of the deflection for the second one. That kills the game. And even after Motherwell scored with a free kick, shot, however you want to say. I never really felt that Rangers were going to crumble. That's been something that's we've always had that nagging feeling in the back of your mind at times over the last few years that when teams put a bit of pressure on late on, we've seen it happen. They've dropped points and they've lost goals late on, but I never really had that feeling. So main thing was it was a win. It dampened some of the noise about the manager and the team, but not one that'll make the end of season DVD. I don't think.
No. Obviously, as you say, 3 points most important for Rangers today. But I have to say, Rangers were really poor, but how bad are Motherwell as well? You know, I mean, the game was absolutely horrendous. I think if Motherwell were ever going to take anything of Rangers, it was their chance today, and they didn't do it. So obviously, before we move on, Chris, on the probably we'll chat a little bit Rangers. Your own self, your own career, starting out. Tell us a bit about how you become the Rangers senior writer for the Herald and the Glasgow Times.
All started with a couple of weeks worth of work experience back in the Manchester season. My final exam at uni was actually the day after the Manchester final. So I went to Ibrox, watched the game on the big screen. We'll say no more about that night either. Had a couple of weeks of work experience at the Herald and Times. Finished off my degree and basically just kept saying every Friday, can I come back in on the Monday? Started doing shifts. I finally got taken on to the staff a few months later. Did a lot of the SPFL lower league stuff, like doing your Dumbartons and your Albion Rovers. Moved up into Partick Thistles and Motherwells, and then eventually moved up to doing Rangers during Mark Warburton's first season. So I've been our dedicated Rangers writer since then. Followed Warburton and Pedro, the Murtys, the Gerrard highs and lows, and the highs and lows of Gio as well. So I've been very fortunate to work alongside and some great colleagues at the paper and at other titles as well. And it's taken me to 55. It's taken me to Seville and a few sore ones along the way as well. Unfortunately.
Yeah, obviously, Chris, I mean, it was a chance to be a senior writer. Now we all know, well, the Rangers fans know, always have the way Rangers are spoken about in the papers. There's very few, what I can see, Rangers journalists out there. You must be one of the very few.
I think I'm the only dedicated Rangers writer in the entire world. is my claim to fame. I'm the only guy at a Scottish paper who focuses solely on Rangers. There's a number of guys who are more aligned to the club, if you like, and guys that do more Rangers pressers and more Rangers games and get more stories. Just like there's guys that do more Celtic games and more Celtic pressers and get more Celtic stories. So there's a band of us, if you like, that are more towards working with the club and covering the club, just as it is on our side of the city. But I am the only guy at a Scottish paper whose sole job is to cover Rangers 24/7.
Oh, good, okay. So then, obviously, your journey's all. You talk about 55, and then you have the book going for 55. I mean, how well has that done for you?
It's done really well. Really pleased with the feedback that I got from the fans on it. Was overwhelming. I had no inclination at the start how many it would sell. I had no idea how it would unfold and whether it would be a worthwhile project or whether it would be something that would fritter away. So I ended up writing over 100,000 words in the space of 4 months, and spoke to guys inside the club, outside the club. Also spoke to Dave King, John Gilligan and Paul Murray about the takeover years, and really built the book from the March 2015 and how the club then basically became champions again. So I was really fortunate to speak to legends like Richard Gough and Derek Johnson for it. Spoke to Stuart McCall about his time, to some of the staff and fans as well who'd been around about the club, just to try and build up a picture of why 55 was and is, in my opinion, the most significant title that Rangers will ever win and have ever won. And I say the feedback that I got from the punters was great. So unfortunately, I had a inkling of a Seville one last season. If things had gone to that night, there may well be another one being written as we speak. But hopefully I can get back into it again. It certainly didn't put me off the process. It was something I really enjoyed. And in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, I will have a body of work that I can be really proud of to say that marks 55 and what it means for Rangers as a club and Rangers fans as well.
Okay, so I'll keep you. I mean, obviously, the questions are coming in. Obviously, we know what a lot it's going to be about. So, question from Craig Robury Harrison. Evening, chaps. Has Ryan Kent down tools, in your opinion? This is you, Chris.
Down tools, I think, might be a bit harsh, but I think there's certainly more to come from Ryan Kent, and we really need to see it. Really need to see it soon. And something that the manager spoke about a couple of weeks ago. Actually, did a piece on it a couple of weeks ago as well, looking at his output in terms of goals and assists and what he's bringing to the team compared to, let's say, James Forrest over the years, or Jota or Abada over the last couple of years. And we compare Kent's numbers to those guys, it doesn't compare that favourably. I think Rangers need more from him in terms of goals and assists. He's clearly a talented player. We all know how good he can be on his day. I think this season he has been well below those standards. I know the manager spoke about it this morning in the paper, saying that he doesn't think the contract situation is getting to Ryan or affecting him. That's something that has to be sorted and something that has to be addressed. But I think all Gio can do is try and find a way to get the best version of Ryan Kent on the pitch more often than not, because it would certainly be a real bonus to Rangers if they can get him back and firing.
Yeah, okay. But, I mean, Gio, if you go on social media, a lot of fans are calling for Ryan Kent to be dropped from the starting 11. Gio just seems to stick by him, and it doesn't matter what Ryan Kent does, he still plays next week. Surely that's saying to the rest of the players, well, it doesn't matter what you do in training, Kent starts.
You might find that Ryan Kent is still the best option. So Monday to Friday, if Kent is still showing more in training, I think a lot of that could be down to the options that the manager has. So if Kent doesn't play, you're looking at Matondo, who I'm not convinced by, Ryan Kent, or Scott Wright, who I'm not convinced by, Sakala, in and out can do a job at times. I don't think the Rangers have a player who, at their best, is better than Ryan Kent. At his best, I think the manager's almost trying to play him back into form. That's not to say that a couple of games out or a wee spell starting on the bench and then coming into games, that might well be the best way to get Ryan Kent back to those levels. But that's the manager's call, and ultimately he must still think that Ryan Kent is the best option to play on that flank.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that. I mean, has Ryan Kent been actually offered a new contract?
He was offered a contract, as far as I'm aware. It remains obviously unsigned, and no announcement has been made. The talk towards the start of the season was that Kent and Morelos were both close, and that Rangers were hopeful. I think the manager said himself he was hopeful that would happen. It's obviously dragged on in the Morelos case due to his issues off the park, and also what happened around about the PSV game.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the situation with Ryan is, why he hasn't signed on yet. If he's maybe looking at Connor Golson's situation last year, and we're just happy to bide his time, get the season done, and then consider his future. I don't know if he's waiting for January to see what's coming up. I think it is something that Rangers need to address as a matter of urgency if they can, because you can't afford an asset like Ryan Kent to walk out of the club. Somebody you spent £7 million on just a few seasons ago.
Yeah.
I think Rangers have had the £7 million worth out of him, but that doesn't mean to say you can then afford to lose him for nothing.
Yeah.
When you're then potentially looking at going again in the transfer market over the summer. If this is Kent's last season, they can't afford it to be on a Bosman.
Yeah, I mean, Kim also saying here Leeds will be in for Kent in January. Have you heard any inklings of any clubs who would be looking for him?
No, I think Leeds is also the one that were interested before, and they're certainly long-term admirers. I do wonder how much of his form this season has maybe made Premier League clubs doubt if he's at that level yet. Even his European performances haven't been at that level. Maybe if you look at if he'd played at a higher standard in the two Liverpool games, that might have alerted Premier League clubs and said, well, this guy, if he can go and play against Liverpool in Champions League, he must be Premier League standard now. I think he could be doing with a really impressive second half of the season to earn a Premier League move.
Yeah, I'll put this up here now, but did we pay close to 7 million for Kent? Because I can't see us getting £7 for him. It's a waste of a shirt. Bit harsh, but obviously Rangers fans are really patience is running out with Ryan Kent. The contract situation obviously must be playing in his mind, Chris. I mean, will Rangers ship him out in January?
Again, I would be surprised. I know you would rather get something for him than nothing, but if Rangers are still in a title race, if we somehow qualify for the Europa League, I would be surprised if the manager is willing to part with a player like Ryan Kent, somebody that has been over the course and distance, someone that knows how to win things at Rangers. If you lose him for 2 million, do you then go and get a better player for £2 million in the January transfer window, and somebody that can come in and really hit the ground running and make that much of a difference in the second half of the season?
Yeah.
Now that'll be for the manager and for Ross Wilson to weigh up. But I would be surprised if they think there's more value in selling Kent and trying to replace him than there is in holding on to him until the end of the season and potentially risking losing him for nothing.
Well, you see, Chris, what I see is if we did get 2 million for him, the current board and the director of football wouldn't buy anybody.
I think they would. I think they would have to. I don't think you can afford to. Don't think you can afford to lose Ryan Kent.
We lost Joe Aribo.
Lost Joe Aribo and signed Malik Tillman. I think would be the board's argument in that one.
Yeah, on loan, may I say, signed him on loan, and and we lost Bassey for what? How much did we get for Bassey? 23 million. And we brought on John Suter, injury prone John Suter. So
again, playing devil's advocate, also signed Ben Davis and Yilmaz.
Well, that's fair enough, but obviously Yilmaz, we haven't seen him play yet. So okay, so Ricky Neal, obviously I know Ricky well. How much does Chris think we could get for Ryan Jack? Is Ryan Jack's career over at Rangers, do you think, after this season?
I would be surprised if he's a key part of the squad next season. I think if Ryan stays and signs a new contract, I think you'll see his role diminish. But he really needs to recover from this latest injury and then really finish the season really, really strongly. I think we may well be seeing the end of him, unfortunately, because on his day he can be a real driving force in the middle of the park. He's been a great servant for the club over his time, done a lot for Rangers. But his contract coming towards the last couple of months, having picked up another injury, I think he really needs to finish the season really, really strongly if he's going to, one, earn another contract, but then two, earn a place in the starting 11 next year.
Very important there. Stuart King says Liverpool have a sell on as well if we sell Ryan Kent.
I'm not sure on that one. I couldn't confirm nor deny. Sorry, Stuart.
So if we do sell and it is confirmed if a sell, and then we get less again. But these players running down contracts and the way it is, surely this is surely down to Ross Wilson, Chris. It's his remit in it to make sure players come in through the door, get them back out through the door, get the money in.
It takes two to sign a contract, unfortunately. As Conor Goldson showed last season, no matter how keen Rangers were for him to sign on, if he decides he wants to wait until the summer and finish the season and then discuss his future and then decide on his future, there's very little that Rangers can do. I do think they should have tried to have tied him up before they got to the last year. That's certainly a fair argument. Kent and Manos should have been dealt with before now. And you look at the rebuild that's going to be required in the squad. If worst case scenario you do lose Morelos and Kent on freeze, you've got McGregor out of contract, you've got Hollander out of contract, you've got Ryan Jack out of contract, Arfield, Steve Davis, and that's before you then start saying, well, he's not good enough or he's not good enough, and then you also have to try and replace these guys and rebuild the squad. So the business that was done this summer, I don't think has been good enough. I think they should have spent more money or spent the money that they did spend a bit more wisely. But in terms of some of the contracts, it's almost been kicked down the road 12 months, and they'll have to readdress that problem at a later date. That later date will be this summer, and Rangers are once again heading for a fairly substantial rebuild.
Yeah, okay. Philip Lynn says, is it time for Leon King to start more regularly?
I think he will do, not just because Connor Goldson's obviously picked up an injury and will be sidelined for the next few months, unfortunately. It has always been the plan this season for Rangers to try and involve Leon King more regularly. It's one of the reasons that Leon Balogun was allowed to leave, frees up that place in the squad. I think Gio has already shown his faith in Leon, shown that he's willing to play him, pitched him in against Liverpool. There's no bigger stage for him this season. I think so far he's really equipped himself well. He's been impressive, and this spell over the next 2, 3, 4 months could well be the making of him. I think it would be really advantageous for Leon if Ben Davies can stay fit and really form a partnership. If you lose Goldson and you lose Davies, and you're then pitching Leon in alongside James Sands or John Linson maybe dropping back in there, that puts a lot of pressure on young shoulders. But he has shown that he's got the mentality. I spoke to him at press day Rangers had before the start of the season, and he is an impressive character. He's got something about it. He's got something about him. Sorry, he knows the club. He's also a fan. He knows what's expected here. Come up through the ranks, been drilled in the Rangers way. He knows that the Rangers is a club that has to win. So the pressure that's on his shoulders won't be a surprise to him this season. And hopefully he can just continue to go from strength to strength over the next wee while.
Yeah. Do you not think it's strange too, but I know obviously Leon King, and we can't throw too many kids in at once, but when you think back to Charlie McCann's last start and he got man of the match, he then just dropped out for the next one.
It's a fine line that the manager has to tread sometimes. There's some young players that you can put in and really expose them to a lot of first team football early. There's other guys he clearly feels can be dipped in and out. I think Gio has spoken positively enough about Charlie McCann enough to say that he's a player that he likes, and it might well be next season by the time Charlie gets a chance to really establish himself. And the same with Alec Lowry. If we can get him fit, I think he certainly will have a part to play in the second half of the season, hopefully.
Okay, so Craig Harrison says on YouTube, too many of the players have it's only Motherwell, I don't need to be 100% in mentality. This isn't just a Gio issue, as even under Gerrard we had games when we struggled. Is that, you think what it is? Is it mentality that we just have to turn up and we lift the 3 points, or is it teams put that extra effort against Rangers? Because from what I seen at Motherwell today, I didn't think Motherwell, I thought that was their best chance to beat Rangers.
I was surprised at how poor Motherwell were, I have to say. I spoke to Stephen Hamill at his press conference on Friday, and he referenced the Celtic game that they had a couple of weeks ago and how disappointed they were not to take anything from it. He said, well, Motherwell don't just want to be a team that can compete against the Old Firm, but then just get beaten and accept that they want to be a team that can go and beat the Old Firm. I would have thought today would have been a real chance for Motherwell. I was expecting more from them to put Rangers under a bit of pressure, to really see what Rangers were made of. As poor as Rangers were, I felt they were still comfortable in the game. I never felt they were under any real threat. There was a stat that the BBC had at half time that Motherwell never had a touch inside the Rangers penalty box during the first half. And that was very unlike the Motherwell performance that I was expecting. So I think Rangers went through the motions to an extent, but they still had enough, and overall still deserved to win the game.
Yeah. Okay. One from Craig Harrison again, and this is something I've always been asking myself: is this a surprise that Gio hasn't bought any Dutch players? Is this an indication he doesn't have final say on signings?
Could be a surprise, I suppose. It depends if he feels that there's value for money in that market. The club have obviously said quite a lot recently on finances and what's been spent and what's been made available, in comparison to what's been brought in over the last 6, 12, 18 months or so. If Gio feels that there's no value for money in the Dutch market, he's quite entitled to go and look elsewhere. I would be surprised if he signs, or if Rangers sign players that he has no say over at all. I don't think that's how it works. And I'd be surprised if the club wanted to go down that route. You can't appoint a manager and then foist 10 new signings on him and say, well, this is the hand you've been dealt. Gio will have and does have a say in the transfer strategy. I don't think that transfer strategy has been particularly successful. I think that's one of his main issues right now. But I don't think you can read too much into the fact that there's not been any Dutch players brought in.
Yeah, but I think what most fans think is if you bring in De Vos from Ajax, so he'll know loads of young Dutch players, maybe not at Ajax, but other ones in the leagues, and we haven't been linked with anybody. There has to be players in Holland that can improve us.
Well, the Tillman deal was quite a lot to do with Roy Mackay, his contacts at Bayern Munich. So I think that's an example of the management team in the club using the contacts and the experience on Gio's staff. I'm sure there are young players that they're aware of. There also must be young players that Dave Voss has worked with and that Gio has worked with in Holland as well. It's always a risk when you sign young players, much like Tillman. If you sign guys that are inexperienced at first team level, you sign guys that perhaps aren't physical enough for the Scottish game, perhaps don't have the mentality to succeed in the Scottish game. There's no point in signing players just because they're Dutch or just because they've come through the Ajax academy. I'm sure the kids in Ajax or PSV or Feyenoord or Bayern Munich in Tillman's case, these players will be very technically gifted. They will be at a level that's higher than what Rangers are producing. But there's so much more goes into it rather than just know how good they are with the ball at their feet. When you come to a club like Rangers, you have to have that bit more about you.
Yeah, obviously this is questions coming up a lot. So Gary Patton says, would you agree, Chris, that the signings that came in this summer was down to Ross Wilson and Gio not having much say in the signings?
No, like I mentioned, I don't think Rangers would have signed any players at all without the managers having some say in it. It's Ross Wilson's job to, alongside the recruitment staff and the scouting staff, they then compile a list of positions and players, go to the manager and say, right, we've got 3 attacking midfielders for you. Which one do you want to push the button on? What one do you want to sign? And it's then up to Ross and the board to go and make that happen in financial terms. I don't think, I'm certainly not aware of any players that Ross Wilson has gone out and signed behind the manager's back and then said, right, Gio, you need to go and play him, you need to go and stick him in the team.
Yeah. What's your thoughts then on the likes of Veerman that we were so much after, but it just didn't happen?
That's the game, unfortunately. Somebody that Steven Gerrard identified. I think that's probably quite a key part in Steven Gerrard's Rangers story. He felt the time was right, as I know a lot of the fans said the time was right to go bigger and go again and to try and take Rangers to that next level. I think Veerman would have been a hugely important part of that if they could have got that deal done. Ultimately, the board decided that the finance wasn't there and that wasn't one that they could pursue. Rangers had to then go down different options. I think we can see those options probably weren't as successful as Joey Veerman may well have been. But after that, even then decided that the time was right to move on. He felt that the club's ambitions didn't match his own. But Veerman certainly would have been a good signing for it. I don't think you can deny that he's an excellent midfielder and the type of midfielder that squad and the team could certainly do with.
Yeah, and obviously another name mentioned was Skov Olsen. Another one I think was Steven Gerrard identified. Again, we didn't get him.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of it comes down to how much the board are willing to spend to take Rangers to that next level. I know the recruitment policy and strategy over the last 6, 12, 18 months has come in for a lot of criticism, a lot of discussion recently. Fairly, I think. I don't think Rangers have been anywhere near successful enough in terms of the deals that they've done. I don't think the squad this season is good enough. But we are where we are. Gio then has to get the best out of the hand that he's got. But I certainly think there have been mistakes made in the transfer market, and Rangers haven't, from the highs of 55 and the highs of Seville, Rangers haven't progressed to the levels I feel they should have reached after those highs.
Yeah, because if you look at the Turkish Ridvan we've run, the Turkish left back, who have barely seen kick a ball. Now we spent a lot of money on him, but I don't understand why the money wouldn't be available to go after Olsen and Veerman, and if they can go out there and spend it on the left back and keep him on the bench. Now, that's why I think this is me just thinking this is just Ross Wilson making his mind up, and Gio saying, well, you know what, I didn't want him, so I'm not going to play him.
Well, Veerman and Olsen were obviously targets previously. Now Veerman's going back to Gerrard's final summer at Ibrox, so I think things have moved on, certainly financially since then. I know it's something the club also discussed in interviews that Stuart and John Bennett did over the last couple of weeks to try and address some of the financial concerns and where the club is and where they're heading. Yilmaz is a player I'm surprised we've not seen more of. I thought if you're going to spend that kind of money on him, he must be one of the first names on the team sheet. Yeah. But as Borna Barisic said to us 2-3 weeks ago, it does take time for players to settle in. It's easy to forget that he's moving to a different country, different climate, new language, new teammates, new dressing room, new style of football and way of playing. It will take some players, a wee bit longer to settle in. Borna Barisic is actually one of the perfect examples of that. It took him a long time to settle in. He's had his highs and lows. So I don't think we can write off Yilmaz just yet. Although I'm surprised that we've not seen more of him so far.
Yeah, and obviously you spoke earlier on, Chris, about the board trying to re-engage with the fans and make things right. But after all, was it 2 weeks ago they had that John Bennett statement on YouTube? Well, it went to YouTube free. First of all, it was a paywall where we had to pay to listen to it, and then they put it on YouTube where you could watch it, and then they didn't post the last bit. So what would your thoughts be on that as somebody looking in from the media?
At a time when they were preaching communication, I think you can say that was a communications failure. I don't think that whole endeavour came out of... I don't think Rangers or John came out of that situation looking as good as they hoped they would do. I think it probably damaged both of them in the eyes of the fans somewhat, but not irreparably. No, I think John has spoken well a number of times about Rangers. He does speak very well. He's clearly a switched-on guy. He's clearly got his heart and his money in the right place, and he has done a lot for the club since he became involved. And I know it's easy for the fans to say they want sweeping changes at boardroom and sack him, but these guys have done a lot for the club, and no matter who stays and who goes over the next few months or few years, I think it's important to recognise and also appreciate the contribution of Douglas, of John Bennett, of the investors that have come in, and also the work that Dave did and that John did and that Paul did in a previous era as well.
Yeah, and obviously we had a director resign during the last week, didn't we? Should we read anything into that?
No, the official line from the club was to focus on business commitments. It'll be interesting to see if Barry's space is filled. I know he's not a huge shareholder in financial terms. I think it was about 2% or so. I think he has in the company. But again, someone who has stepped up to put his money in when the club needed it. He's not someone who's done any press, as far as I'm aware. Not someone I think a lot of the fans would recognise or know. But someone who has more than played his part over both spells on the board, because he also stepped down just before Gerrard came in alongside Paul Murray. And then came back on again a couple of years ago. So someone again who I think deserves the thanks and the gratitude of the fan base.
Yeah. Obviously, as John Bennett was wheeled out to tell us that bit the engagement. Why do we never hear from as fans? Why do we never hear nothing from Douglas Park, the chairman? Why is our chairman so reluctant to go in front of the press or the cameras and speak to us?
I think the club probably feel that John is just better at it. When you look at the way that Dave King handled himself as chairman, the way that Dave just handles himself in general, he is very good. He's a very good public speaker. His comments are always forthright. He's always very honest. If you look at his AGM speeches, they were always lengthy and detailed. Douglas just has a different style of chairmanship. He's a very different person, and I think the club feel that John can probably communicate their thoughts and their ideas in a better way that Douglas can. Not everyone is comfortable in front of the cameras and in front of microphones and taking questions from press. So I think that the club just feel that John's probably in a better position and has more experience of doing that. As I say, I think he does speak very well about Rangers. I don't think his RTV stuff a fortnight ago, I don't think that was his best performance. I think he may well realise that himself, and the club may realise that just after the feedback that it's had. But overall, I think he's a real asset to the Rangers board, and someone who can present himself in a way that you would expect of a Rangers potential chairman, certainly a Rangers deputy chairman, and someone who can represent the club in the right way.
Yeah, I just feel as a fan, I think I think Douglas Park should speak to the fans. I don't know why he's so reluctant to come in front of the cameras. I just don't get it. He's the chairman of Rangers Football Club. Dave King had no problem, coming in front of the cameras. David Murray done it.
Mm-hmm. Well, as I say, some people are more confident doing interviews and doing broadcast things and doing RTV and doing EGM speeches even. I think we'll certainly hear from the chairman round about EGM time. I would be surprised if the club don't try and do something with him. They'll also have to address the shareholders at the meeting as well. So we will hear from the chairman sooner rather than later, I would think. But I think it's just a case of he's perhaps not as comfortable doing it, whereas John is very comfortable doing it and very good at it. So I can see why the club wanted to put him forward as the public face of the messages that they were trying to get across at that time.
Yeah, I'm not out to batter John and all, but I mean, John told us he was happy with it was the best squad at Ibrox in years, and he could sleep in his bed at night. Do you think it's the best squad at Ibrox? Considering you wrote the book on the Going for 55, do you think we have improved since Steven Gerrard's time?
I don't think this squad's as good. No, I think if you look at the strength and depth of it and what you're getting out of, I know there's also a lot of similar names. You've got your McGregors, Goldson, Tav, Arfield, Morelos, that spine of the team is still there. But Alan McGregor is a couple of years older. So is Steve Davis, so is Scott Arfield, so is Ryan Jack. Morelos is not the same player right now as he was at that time. Kamar Roof is injured and not contributing the way he was during that season. Same for Yanis Hadji. There's a lot of players who have, through no fault of their own, just through naturally, have declined. I don't think the signings have been good enough. I don't think they have addressed the areas in the squad that had to be addressed adequately. I can see why John was trying to put a positive spin on the squad, because it's also the squad that they have invested in. But right now, I think the results and the performances speak for themselves and tell you I don't think this team right now is as good as the 55 team.
Yeah, because Craig said on YouTube, as much as I love Scott Arfield, the fact he's having to play 3 games a week shows how poor the recruitment has been. This side should have been involved after 55. Instead, the club have sat still.
The goal that Scott scored against Liverpool was a very Scott Arfield style of goal, and he's still one of the few players in that squad that's capable of making that run and finishing the way that he did. I think Scott Arfield has been a wonderful servant for the club. He's a hero of this era. He's been great. He's always great to deal with from a press perspective, and it's no disrespect to him to say I don't think he should be an integral part of this team. Rangers should have found a way to not replace him completely. They should have found a way to bring in the next Scott Arfield and allow Scott to have a key role in actually shaping that player going forward, to have the experiences that he's got, not just at Rangers but in the game in general. He's a valuable asset. I can see why the club would want to have him around the squad and have him around the dressing room for another season. He can clearly still contribute to a level as he has done, but the summer should have been used to find the next Scott Arfield, to bring in somebody who he can tutor and mentor and help settle in, so that when the time does come where Rangers have to say, I'm sorry Scott, we're going to shake hands and go our separate ways, whether that's in the summer coming or the summer after. When that time comes, Scott should actually help mould his replacement in the team. But I don't think that's one of the areas in the recruitment strategy that I think hasn't been done properly.
It's fair to say that the midfield's been neglected by the recruitment.
I don't think it's been addressed properly. I don't know if you could say neglected. I think if they have also they spent a bit of money in terms of getting Tillman in. I think they hope that he could perhaps help fill that creative role that Scott does, and that Joe Rebo left when he departed in the summer. But I think they did need another midfielder. I think they also need somebody else to play wide right. They needed backup at right back. They've done with another striking option. Considering Kamar Roof's in this situation, so I think there were areas of the team and of the squad that did need a bit more surgery than they got. And I said the central midfield is certainly one of them.
Yeah. Well, Hugh Thompson says, Chris, the way Rangers are going and the chairman sends out the second-hand man, just the same as Tav, when we get beat, he won't come out and speak. He sends someone else out. Now, Tavernier's been getting a bit of abuse because he doesn't face the cameras after a defeat. Is that something, do you think, because obviously you're in the media, you're in there, is Tavernier scared? I don't know, he's not scared, it's not the word, but he just doesn't have the bottle to go and face the media, to be picked over?
I would defend Tav in this one. I think his record at fronting up over his time at Rangers is very good. And you think of Old Firm defeats or cup defeats or European ones or the games that Rangers should have won. I think overall Tav's record is good. He didn't come through the mix zone after the game the other night there, but he had the UEFA drugs test to go and do. So while he's away doing that, he's not allowed to go into the dressing room, or he's not allowed to come through the mix zone. Once UEFA pick you, you have to get into the doping control room, and you're there until that test has been done. Whether it takes 10 minutes or whether it takes 2 hours, that's you in there. That was Tav's excuse, if I want to be a better word, on Wednesday night. He then spoke on the following morning, and also those quotes were in the Scottish papers on Friday. So I think his record overall is good. He's had some tough days as a Rangers player, and has some tough days as Rangers captain. So I wouldn't say he doesn't have the bottle for it, or he just doesn't fancy it. I think he fully appreciates his role as captain. And there's other guys in the squad who don't fulfil media duties and who haven't spoken for a long time. I think Tav more than takes his turn, and more than comes round when it's his turn, or when it's his moment, if you like, to come forward when he has to.
Yeah. Okay. Hugh Thompson saying, well, it's not just that game. Look, when Jared was there, he done the same. We got beat off Hearts, but I mean.
Is that the Tynecastle game and Gerrard half threatened to resign after it?
That must be that, aye. So obviously, Chris, when I introduced you, I introduced saying the words close contact of Dave King, and why I say that is because Gary Patton, you might be able to enlighten us on something, has said Dave King should be back as chairman. We have just went downhill since Dave King stepped down. Can the Rangers fans expect to see Dave King return, Chris?
Return in what sense? Return as an investor, return on the board, return as chairman?
On the board?
I wouldn't have thought so, no.
So that's put to bed then. It's not happening for the Rangers fans. What
I would say, sorry, Gary, what I would say on Dave is he's very aware of what's going on at the club. So he may not be on the board, he may not be chairman anymore. He's fully aware of the team, he's fully aware of the squad, the manager, what's going on behind the scenes. He knows what's happening at boardroom level, and is still keeping a very close eye on it, as you would expect for someone with his shareholding from a business perspective, and someone as big a Rangers fan he is as Dave is. So he knows what's going on, and will be keeping fully up to speed of all developments.
I'm so going to ask you, had Dave King stayed, would Stephen Gerrard have stayed?
The answer to that one is yes. I don't need to think too much about that one. If Dave King had still been Rangers chairman, Stephen Gerrard would not have left the club. That's a fairly straightforward one. That.
So, I'm going towards then. So, Stephen Gerrard has went because he doesn't agree with the current board.
Current board, I don't think you would say that. I think there were disagreements with the chairman, and he felt that the way the club were heading under Douglas Park's chairmanship was not in the direction that he wanted it to go. I think Stephen felt that promises, if you like, were broken. He expected Rangers to go bigger and to go again in terms of taking the squad to the next level. As we discussed earlier on, that didn't happen, and when that didn't happen, I think Stephen felt that the writing was on the wall. I don't think Rangers tried very hard to keep Stephen as manager, and that then fed into, once the Aston Villa situation came around, I think Stephen then felt this was one that he had to take.
Yeah. When you say they didn't try very hard, is that just simply a transfer budget?
No, I mean I don't think the chairman or members of the board tried too hard to dissuade him not to go to Aston Villa. There was interest from Newcastle previously. Stephen decided that wasn't the right one for him. But by the time the Villa interest then came around and how things had unfolded in the months previously, I think he then felt that Villa was the one that he had to take. In an ideal world, he would have stayed until the end of that season. I think if it had done, the end of that term probably would have been a natural break. All firm managers have a shelf life. It's a very intense atmosphere. Obviously, it's a very difficult place and a very difficult environment to work in. I think if Stephen had stayed, won the league again, defended 55, and then also got that automatic qualification to the Champions League, I don't think he would have guided Rangers into that Champions League campaign. I think he would have got us back to the Champions League if they defended 56 or won 56, sorry. And I think that would have then been the ideal point to say, look, I've been good for you, you've been good for me. It's time to move on. But obviously, history tells a very different story.
Obviously, it's a question I'm going to ask you. If do you think Stephen Gerrard could return to Rangers? Not under the current board, but if Dave King was to come back in,
under the current regime with Douglas Park as chairman, no. If Dave King was chairman, I think Stephen may well be interested, but I don't think we're going to see that. I don't think we're going to see that situation unfold. Stephen's obviously still got a job to do at Aston Villa, and I wrote a piece a few weeks ago saying the Rangers fans should wish him well in that. I know he left under a cloud and people were unhappy with the way. Some people were unhappy at the manner and the timing of it. But for everything that Stephen Gerrard did for Rangers, I certainly wish him well. I would like to see him back at Ibrox in the future. I think he deserves the chance to come back and say goodbye properly, come back and take the claim of the crowd again. But I'd be very surprised if we see him back as Rangers manager.
Okay, but Ed McCann says, also been chatting with it, Chris, in the future, can you see Dave King coming back as chairman?
Much like Stephen Gerrard, I would be very surprised.
But could we see Dave King back in some role?
I don't think you would see Dave as a director on someone else's board. Again, I think if having served as chairman and having done things in his way, I'd be surprised if he would want to come back as a just a normal director on someone else's board. As I said earlier on, he is very much aware of what's happening at present.
Yeah, because Hugh Thompson's saying Dave King must be worried about his shares taking a pounding, the way this board are heading by running the club backwards and not looking to the future. So surely Dave King would be keeping a close eye on that. His shares,
Well, he's obviously got the agreement with Club 1872. I know he's fully committed to that. I know 1872 are fully committed to that, and that's something that both parties will work towards over the fullness of time. In terms of Dave then transferring his shareholding, I think it sits about 15-16% at present. Club 1872 around about 4.5%, 5%, I think. So that would then give 1872 and give the Rangers fans a real say at boardroom level, not the 25 plus one that would be so important to them. But it would certainly give them a real say in it. And I know that Dave is fully committed to that process, no matter how long it takes. And it's that process has been ongoing, coming up in 2 years now. I think it was January 2020 that was launched. So I say time will tell how long that sheer transfer process takes. But I know Dave is fully committed to making that his legacy. And he wants to leave Rangers and leave his shareholding in the hands of the Rangers fans, so that the Rangers fans can protect the club for as long as possible.
Yeah, I know it doesn't really happen in football. You never hear managers really coming out. But do you think Steven Gerrard should have come out and told the fans exactly why he was going?
It's not, as you say, it's not something that happens very often. I think if he just left and not gone elsewhere, it might have happened. I think as soon as he decides he wants to become Aston Villa manager, all his focus has to be on Aston Villa. If you're the Villa board or Christian Purslow or Villa players or fans, you don't really want to see your manager then having to justify himself and say why he left. Stephen obviously made his position clear at the time in terms of the family reasons and why he felt it was time to return to the Premier League, and also what it meant to him personally. I think that was probably all he was going to say and all he had to say at that time. That's not to say in future he may well feel that he wants to come out and add a bit more meat to the bone. But I think at that time he handled the situation in the right manner.
Yeah, okay. Because I remember after the PSV game, Gio talked about in his press conference after saying about, he was asked about the money they get from Champions League football, and Gio spoke about how he would sit down and talk about how the money would be basically used to bring in better quality players. That was after PSV, and after that we never signed one player. Now, is this the same effect Steven Gerrard was facing? The board again?
I know that's a huge bone of contention amongst the fans, because it was something that John tried to talk through in the RTV interviews. I know Stuart Robertson had an interview with the Rangers Review as well. That was something he tried to address in terms of just some of the money that the board have spent on various infrastructure things. Ultimately, the fans want to see the best Rangers team on the park, and they want to see a successful team on the park. And I don't think it's being unreasonable to make the point to the board that having got money for Steven Gerrard and then Nathan Patterson, having won the league, having got to the Europa League final, having then sold Joe Aribo and Calvin Bassey, all of those things could not have been budgeted for. All of those things were over and above what the club had already sanctioned to put in new pitches and the work that's been done at Ibrox behind the scenes, and the roofs and the LED boards and all the great work that's been done at Auchenhowie. That was all budgeted for long term. Getting to the Europa League final was not budgeted for. Yeah. Turning Calvin Bassey into a £20 million player was certainly not budgeted for. And I understand that's why the fans are as unhappy at the investment that was made in the summer. Having got that Champions League bonus, no matter at what level that Champions League bonus is, the money is a bonus. So that money should then have been reinvested in the squad. Even if they had gone and put an extra $5 million on the park, I don't think it would have made a massive difference in terms of Rangers being able to qualify from the section. But it would have helped Rangers potentially win the league this season, which is then a snowball effect, because it then gets you back into the Champions League next season. And that's the battle that they're now fighting. Having failed to build on 55, they put themselves in the back foot. They managed to find a way around that to qualifying this season. But if they don't win the league again, having not invested in strengthening again, there's only so many times you can keep pulling off that miracle of getting into the group stages. And all the while, Rangers don't bank the Champions League money, Celtic do, and it becomes even more difficult year on year to then bridge that financial gap and to bridge the gap on the park again.
Because for me, when I seen them, obviously Rangers were never going to turn down the money for Calvin Bassey. and then we sold Joe Aribo down to Southampton. I would hate to think what would have happened if we hadn't qualified for the Champions League, where we might have been, as in player wise.
I think the board put the money that they felt it could have been spent. Gio, it's then up to the manager and it's up to Ross Wilson to then spend that budget appropriately and for them to do the best business that they can. Personally, I don't think the best business was being done. I would have liked to have seen areas of the squad addressed. I think the team could have been better. And as I said, I can understand why the fans are upset. I don't think MD is calling for £30 million to be going to spend all on the one sum, but on the back of charging the fans what they did for the Champions League ticket prices, on the back of short sales, and on the back of unexpected successes and unexpected windfalls in a football sense, I think the more should have been done in terms of then putting some of that money back on the pitch.
Yeah, because Hugh Thompson says, Chris, why does this board not want the fans to have a say? Because last year, Rangers said the sales of players would go back to the squad, whereas next to nothing has been spent on the team.
I think, well, I don't think you say next to nothing has been spent on the team. No, they did spend 1.8 on Cholak. Matondo was a couple of £1 million. There's obviously fees in terms of the loans for Tillman. There's obviously signing on fees if the free transfers like Tom Lawrence. Spent money on Ben Davies. We've also discussed Yilmaz. Money was spent. Whether Rangers have got value for the money spent right now, I don't think they have. Whether Rangers could have spent more of the unexpected windfalls that we've discussed, I think they could have done. I don't think you can say they've all just put their fingers in their ears over the summer and said, "Oh, it'll do. We're not going to spend anything." They have spent money, and Gio has defended this squad. He said it's his. He said he's happy with it. Well, if the manager's happy with it, it's then up to him to get the best out of it.
Okay, put this up from Ed McCann. Chris, surely if this board didn't back Gerrard, what chance is Gio and the fans of us getting back top to where we belong? Something tells me they're more interested in themselves in the club. Is that a fair comment? They're more interested in themselves than Glasgow Rangers?
No, I don't think you could say that. I think you can question their judgment. It's fair to question their decisions, and if there's any support that deserves to have a voice and to have their opinion heard and deserve to know what's going on at the football club, it's the Rangers fans. Now, for all the things that they've been through over the last 10, 12 years or so, Rangers fans are more than entitled to ask questions, and I would hope that the Rangers fans have learned from the last decade or so, and they are more willing to ask questions. They are more interested in the off-field machinations and what's going on. I don't think you can say Douglas Park or John Bennett or any of the investors now, or the investors that have been previously, I don't think you can say they're in it for themselves. I think it's right to question how they're running Rangers. It's fair to question if they are the right people to continue running Rangers. Is Douglas Park the right man to be Rangers chairman? I think that's a debate. People can have that debate. But I don't think it's, as I said earlier on, I think we have to remember the personal sacrifices and certainly the financial sacrifices that these guys have made over a number of years. A number of them are more in terms of finances than they ever thought they would be, but they keep going back. They keep finding ways to make it work. And while Rangers is not in the best position it could be right now, it would be in a hell of a lot worse state if it wasn't for the investors and directors that we've had over the last 7 years or so since regime change.
Yeah. Obviously, a lot of stuff about Dave King coming in. Chris is just going over the same stuff, but Hugh Thompson says again, I don't think Gio was the same. What gets spent, I think it's down to Ross Wilson. Would you? I mean, we've talked about this before, but a lot of fans obviously are looking now and thinking, well, these players being brought in, Gio was not picking them.
It's up to those players to impress enough and earn their place in the team. I say Cholak has come in and done very well. Tillman looked bright earlier on, faded. It's up to him to then regain that place. Tom Lawrence looks like a decent bit of business. in terms of others, like Yilmaz, as I mentioned earlier on, it does just take some players that bit longer to get up to speed and to settle into a club like Rangers. I know the line from John and Stuart was both, we've signed them for 5 years, not 5 weeks. That's fair to an extent. You have signed them long term, you have signed them because you think he will be a good player for Rangers going forward. I think it's also fair to say, well, why haven't we seen more of him so far? If the reason is he's just not quite settled in the country, or it's taken time for him to adapt to the team, that's fine. That's going to happen. I think the transfer criticism overall should be how much was spent in certain areas rather than just picking on individual players.
Yeah. Do you think Dave King could buy the shares of anybody else to give him more power? Or would he be interested?
As in buy the shares of other
investors?
I don't see what would win that for him. If he's committed to the 1872 deal, in terms of then giving his shareholding to the fans, I don't see why it would make sense for him to then spend money buying out a current investor.
Yeah, because as it stands, we're just going to have to get used to what we're being served up, because I can't see anybody else coming along.
I would be surprised if there's. I don't think you'll find someone that's going to come in and buy all the shares. Nobody's going to come in and buy out Douglas and buy out likes of Stuart Gibson or Julian Volta. That's going to take tens of millions of pounds, and people interested in spending tens of millions of pounds on Scottish football clubs are few and far between. It's not an attractive investment opportunity from a financial sense. Rangers need investors with an emotional attachment, and that's certainly what they've got in the board and the investors that are there. I think the fans should be heartened by that fact that they know their club is in safe hands with the investor group that's there. But that then doesn't mean that they shouldn't scrutinise decisions that the chairman or the board or the executive team or the manager or sporting director make. They are quite entitled to have their say on decisions being made, but they are now able to make those points and raise those points with the backing and knowing that the club is in safe hands, that the club's not going to be in financial peril. And one of the key components of the King 1872 deal is to try and give the fans more say at boardroom level. So if the fans want to have more of an influence, if the fans want to have more of a say, and the fans want to ultimately safeguard Rangers from history repeating itself, that's the perfect mechanism for it. If the fans as a whole decide that they don't want that, then the King 1872 deal will take years and years to complete, and the shareholding ultimately won't have the effect that it could have.
Yeah, okay. So obviously we had you on for an hour now, Chris, but so going forward, January, can you see Rangers doing much business in January?
I think they will probably have to, because as I've said, I don't think the squad is good enough. If they're still hopefully in a title race, if they can get through this period leading up to the World Cup break, that's then a chance to reset and take stock and really do a lot of planning for January. But it all depends on how the next few weeks go. If Rangers are still in the title race and can still win the Premiership this season, I think they will look to strengthen and go again. But the deals obviously have to be more successful than they were last January, because those ones didn't address any of the feelings in the squad.
Yeah, because Craig Harrison said Robin McCrory signing a new deal indicates Gio sees him as the future number one. Surely if this is the case, he needs game time this season, as obviously McGregor and McLaughlin both have impressed, except in bursts. You think Robbie McCrory is the future Rangers number one?
I know that Rangers obviously like Robbie. That's why they also convinced him to sign a new contract just a couple of weeks ago. I'm surprised that he's not in the matchday squad ahead of John McLaughlin. Now that Gio has made the call that Alan McGregor is number one, I'm not sure I see the value in Robbie still being number three. If you go with a train of thought that this will be McGregor's last season, I don't see how John McLaughlin can then be number one next season. So therefore, it's either Robbie McCrory or it's a new goalkeeper that you go and spend £2, £3, whatever £1 million on. if you're going to decide it will be Robbie McCrory, he has to play in a Dundee game in midweek. He has to get the odd league game, probably plays early rounds of the Scottish Cup as well. If you don't, I don't really see the point in a new contract. This season has to be about finding out if Robbie is ready to be that number one next season, rather than getting to the summer, McGregor retires, you move John McLaughlin on and you say thanks but no thanks, and then you just go and put Robbie straight in and say, right, well, you've wanted your chance, you know, better go and take it. Because as John McLaughlin has shown, if you don't take your chance straight away, it's easy to fall out of the squad. So I don't really see the value in signing Robbie, committing your future to Robbie and him to Rangers, and then not giving him the chances over next wee while. So I would hope that he does get that chance, because he is someone that I think could be the next Rangers number one. But ultimately we have to find that out on the pitch.
Anything about any players leave us in January? Can you see anybody moving on?
Don't know. Glenn Kamara, maybe. If you look at him having a bit of interest in the summer, has fallen out and been in and out of the squad. Again, I don't really see the value of, if there's money on the table for Glenn, you're going to get more for him in January than you will do in the summer, as his contract gets another 6 months on it. So I think he might be one that would maybe look to cash in on. In terms of, I actually spoke about this to one of the guys from our papers earlier on, Rangers are at risk of becoming short of sellable assets. You think this time last year they had a Rebo. I think you can get money for Kent, you'll get money for Morelos. Passy turned into a huge windfall for them. They also got money for Nathan Patterson. They're now a wee bit short of guys that you can sell to then go and reinvest. And the whole business model of bring them in, make them better, and sell them on, that's about maximising their value. I think they did that at the right time with Passy. They got money at the right time and moved them on at the right time. Probably missed the boat in terms of Aribo a wee bit and only getting 6 for him. If you hold on to Kamara again, you probably missed the boat in terms of him. He should have probably moved on this summer. So I don't think we'll see. I don't think MD has impressed enough over the first half of the season to warrant a big money bid from elsewhere. I'd be surprised in that regard. But Kamara may well be one that I think now's the time to move him on. When you look at how much he's actually contributing at present.
Yeah, you talk about the business model in the way of sellable assets. So does that lie firmly at the feet of Ross Wilson again, or is that board level, or what is that?
Well, ultimately he's there as sporting director to oversee that strategy. Now that's one of the key components of his job. I think it's easy for people to think that the sporting director or director of football only does transfers. It is more wide ranging than that in terms of the academy stuff and dealing with the board, and there is more to it than solely just it ins and outs. But that is clearly a huge part of it, and a huge part of his remit. And we also spoke earlier on about the contract situation as well. That's something that very much falls on Ross Wilson's plate. So he will be aware of market values of players, and I think he will be aware that there isn't a need for Rangers to maximise that once again, because I say we can't afford to miss the boat on the likes of your Kamaras, and we can't afford the likes of Morelos and Kent to leave the club for free. So it's a really defining couple of months coming up transfer-wise for Rangers, because how the next window goes really then shapes the summer, and how the summer goes can potentially shape the next 2 or 3 seasons.
Yeah, okay. So it's the last one, Chris. Put it up with Hugh Thompson. Chris, we're never second best to any club in Scotland, but the way the club is getting treated by the way we are, then the board are settling for second best. Is that fair comment? The board is settling for second best?
If you ask John Bennett, he'll tell you that Rangers are striving for best in class. I think that's certainly the ambition for Rangers. I don't think Rangers would settle for second best. I think right now they are second best, unfortunately. Now, the team is not the best in Scotland. The squad is not the best in Scotland. That's partly down to the work that Celtic have done, partly down to the mistakes that Rangers have made. I don't think there'll be anyone in Ibrox sitting with their feet up saying, this is all just fine. We're just going to settle for where we are and go and let Celtic walk off into the sunset and leave us for leave us in the dust. I think there will be, and I'm sure there is a desire for things to improve. It's just that Rangers have put themselves on the back foot, and there is now a lot of ground to be made up before they can really start moving forward again.
Yeah, and obviously that just comes. You say the ground you make up. That comes from not moving on when we won 55, not investing, not making sure we've got the better players in. So we've rested on our laurels.
I said the time to go again was after 55. They then had Seville as another opportunity to go again, and on both those occasions, I don't think the club have done enough to improve the squad and to take it onto the next level. So they have put themselves on the back foot, but we're now sitting only 2 points behind Celtic for all the anger and the that's been said over the first few weeks of the season. Yes, the Champions League has been a disaster for us. It's not been good at all. Ultimately, they're only sitting a couple of points behind Celtic. Do I think we'll go on and win the league? Unfortunately, no. I don't think the squad's good enough to do it. But I think the board and the manager would probably appeal for a bit of calm and a bit of support. But now Rangers fans are a very demanding support, and rightly so. And anyone who doesn't meet those standards is really going to come in for some criticism.
Yeah, okay. Chris, you've given us an hour of your time. I know you're a busy man. Thank you so much for coming on. And if you stay on, I'll speak to you when I'm finished. Okay, Chris?
No bother at all.
All right, thanks, Chris. Thank you. So there you have it, folks. Chris Jack, great podcast. Some good questions. Spoke well. Obviously, as Chris says, if Dave King had stayed, Stephen Gerrard maybe might have stayed as well. But anyway, we'll be back next Friday, folks. And I hope you see us all soon. Thank you.